Hey guys, first I want to say I got an email from a really smart subscriber who laid it out step by step how to grow my channel, gave me great advice. One thing he also said, he gave me a lot of technical advice, told me where to go and where people pay fees to get things done, and just mentioned his name and the fee will be waived. Very cool. I was really blessed. And I told him I'll do it step by step, Lord willing, when I get a chance. But one thing he did say was, lose the curtain thing behind you. And I know that was good advice because my wife has told me the same thing in the past. So now that I'm looking at it as I'm talking to you, I realize, yeah, I guess he's right. But until I can figure out where to do a video where I don't have 10 grandchildren running across the room and a dog barking, I got to stick with the window behind me. So Peter Crift, I heard Peter Crift once say, Protestants do a lot more with a lot less. And what he meant was that Protestants don't have the fullness of the faith. They don't have the sacraments. There's so much missing. And I can attest to that. And this morning, while I was in daily mass, we had a guest priest from India. He's a priest from India, but he moved to Orlando, and he's now a part of our diocese. And our bishop told him to stay with our parish for a couple of weeks. Father Derek, who's also from India, is mentor him. He didn't say that, but I kind of seems that way to me, to help him, He let him say mass today. And long story short, really good priest. He's going to be assigned to a diocese in Orlando eventually, but until he's assigned, he's with us. And he gave a really insightful homily this morning. And he was talking about the gospel reading, the wedding at Cana, when our Blessed Mother told Jesus that they ran out of wine. And he made a couple observations that I never really thought about. He said, Mary wasn't asked to help. She invited herself to help the situation. She seen a need and she had compassion. And then she went to the one she knew who could solve the problem. And he challenged us, encouraged us to look where we could serve people and love them in the name of Christ, uninvited. And he made a good point. And it's true, if you've experienced that, when someone asks you for a favor and you do it, it's cool. But when you see a need and you volunteer and meet that need, whatever that need is, you're both blessed doubly. And that was a true statement, but I never really looked at it that way. So after I received the Eucharist and I was meditating on the homily and praying to myself quietly, I was thinking about the words of Jesus. When Jesus was asked, what's the greatest commandment? He said, to love the Lord thy God with all your heart, soul, and mind, and to love your neighbor as yourself. So he said, well, Lord, how do I do that? How do I love you with all my heart, soul, and mind? Love your neighbor as yourself. And as a Protestant, we would say, all you need is faith. And we read in the book of James, where James says, faith without works is dead. He also says, show me your faith and I'll show you my works. And we know he's not talking about works of the law, because St. Paul says we're not saved by works of the law. And the Catholic Church never taught that we need to do works of the law. But the Bible and the church has always taught we need to do works of love. And I was thinking about times I've witnessed works of love, maybe not firsthand, but heard stories that I know are true. And I have a couple good ones from Protestant ministers and a great one from a great Catholic saint that I just want to share. And I'm sure you may have heard one or two or maybe all of these stories. But I want to remind you guys and encourage you guys to love like Christ loved, because these examples were very Christ-like. First, I want to start off with Nicky Cruz. If you're not familiar with Nicky Cruz, his mother was into some kind of witchcraft, that Satanist kind of mixture of, I forget the religion, where they kind of worship saints, but they mix all kinds of weird stuff in it. And it's big in Puerto Rico, and that's where he lived. And his mother told him, Nicky, you have a demon in you. You're a demon child. You're the devil. You'll never be good. You're evil. And she abandoned him in New York City at a very young age. So he became leader of the biggest gang in New York City at the time, the Mau Mau's. And he recalled stabbing people in the stomach and laughing in their face as he reached around and pulled his wallet out. Words are powerful. His mother convinced him he was the devil. He believed it. That was his identity. But there was a young Pentecostal preacher, Assembly's of God preacher named David Wilkerson in Pennsylvania. And he's seen the news, all these horrible gangs in New York City. And he didn't get mad at the gangs. He felt compassion. He said, they're little kids. These are God's children. Someone needs to talk to them. And so he went to New York City and he met Nicky Cruz, and he said, Nicky, I love you. And Nicky said no one's ever said that to him. So he beat the crap out of the pastor. And every time David Wilkerson would see Nicky Cruz, he would say, Nicky, I love you. And Nicky would beat the crap out of him. And then Nicky recalls one time, David Wilkerson came up to him and said, Nicky, I love you. He said, I got so angry, I beat him bloody. I had him on the ground full of blood. I beat him nearly to death. I took out my switchblade knife and put it next to his face and said, you tell me you love me one more time? I will cut you up into 1,000 pieces and spread you all over New York City. And he said David Wilkerson looked up at him and wiped some blood from his eyes and said, Nicky, you could cut me up into 1,000 pieces and throw them all over New York City. And every piece will shout out, Nicky, I love you. Nicky Cruz said the power of that statement, the power of love he felt, just blew him away. And he ran. He just kept running, literally running through New York City. He actually wrote a book called Run, Nicky, Run. And eventually he ran into the arms of Jesus. He repented. His whole gang repented. His whole gang went to the New York City Police Department and handed over their drugs and their weapons in an act of repentance. That is the power of love. And you may say, man, I couldn't do that, man. I couldn't do that. But I had Dale Comstock on this program a few months back. Dale is a retired Delta Force operator. He volunteered for the most dangerous missions in the United States Army to protect our country. But there's other men in the Army, they volunteer to serve, and they don't do as dangerous missions, but we need them. And we serve in the Army of God, and not everybody's, Delta Force operator like Dale Comstock or David Wilkerson. But there's this old Italian guy, Tony Campola, and I mentioned him in my video about smoking cigars and wine a couple weeks ago. He was the guy that, he's an Italian preacher, and his Baptist neighbor seen him with a bottle of wine one Sunday afternoon. He's like, preacher, why do you have that wine? He's like, I'm Italian, I always drink wine with dinner. And she's like, don't you know drinking alcohol is a sin? And he's like, what are you talking about? Jesus' first miracle was turning water into wine. And the woman said, yeah, I wish he never did that. So that's a funny story. But I remember him telling another story that showed the power of love. He talks about he flew to Hawaii to speak at a men's conference, and he had jet lag and he couldn't sleep, and it was like midnight. So he went to look for a coffee shop, and he walked in his coffee shop that was open, and there was a bunch of hookers hanging around talking, and they're like, yeah, Debbie's birthday's tomorrow. She's going to be 30. I can't believe she's so old. And Tony Campola invited himself as service, and he said, hey, how about we throw a surprise party? And they looked at him like, who's this crazy guy? And he's like, seriously, I'll bake the cake, you guys bring the balloons, and we'll surprise her. She's like, okay, we'll do it. Thinking maybe that guy was a John of hers or something. I don't know what they thought, but they didn't question him. So the next night, they set up the balloons in the coffee shop. And as Debbie walked in, they shouted, "Surprise, happy birthday." And the pastor handed her a birthday cake with her name on it, said, "Happy birthday, Debbie." And he made it. And he said the hooker looked at it and looked at him and ran outside with the cake. And then came back in a few minutes later, and Tony's like, "Hey, where's the cake? I've spent all day baking that cake. I want to eat some." And she had tears in her eyes and said, "Why did you do that?" This is the first time in my life that anyone's ever given me a birthday cake. No one's eaten it. I'm bringing it home and putting it in my freezer and keep it forever. So when I feel unloved and unwanted, I can look at that cake and know someone thought enough of me to make me a birthday cake. Who are you? And he said, I'm nobody. I'm just a follower of Christ. And Christ wants me to tell you that he loves you and he thinks about you every day. And that cake is from him. The power of love. The power of love. That simple gesture to love the unloved, to take your time out of your day, to volunteer, to invite yourself to serve. And then probably one of the greatest acts of love I've ever heard about was St. Maximilian Kolbe when he was in a concentration camp, and I think it was like 12 men escaped. So the Nazi guards came and said, if 12 of you guys escape, 12 of you guys are going to starve to death. And he said, we're going to put you in this bunker and watch you starve to death. And he said, you, and he started picking guys randomly, just picking guys randomly. And one guy he picked got on his knees and cries. He says, my wife and my children, they need me. Please have mercy on me. And he's like, no, you're going. And then Father St. Maximilian Kolbe said, please let me die in their place. And the guard was happy to oblige, because the guard didn't like him because he was a Catholic and he was always sharing his little bit of food they were given. He was sharing with everybody. He was always ministering to everybody. So they're like, oh good, it'll be fun to watch this priest die. And they say that everybody died slowly of starvation. And Father Maximilian Kolbe was there ministering to each one as they died. He was with them, comforting them and ministering to them. And he was the last one alive. And they came in and said, we need this bunker. And they gave him a shot, some poison, and he died. And that man and his family, from what I hear, was at the canonization of St. Maximilian Kolbe. And he was there with his children and grandchildren and everyone that survived this horrible Nazi Holocaust. And they all had tears in their eyes, thanking St. Maximilian Kolbe for his love. Because there is no greater love than this, than a man lay down his life for a friend. Another great Protestant missionary, Jim Elliot, said, to give up what you cannot keep in order to gain what you cannot lose is not foolish. Or maybe he said a little bit different, you're not a fool to give up what you cannot lose in order to gain what you're not a fool to give up what you cannot keep in order to gain what you cannot lose. I didn't practice that one because I wasn't planning. It just kind of came to me. But Jim Elliot was a young, I think in his 20s, a young missionary. Him and like 4 or 5 other missionaries went to South America to evangelize cannibals, and the cannibals killed them. And then one of the most fearless women, his wife, Elizabeth Elliot, along with a couple of the other widows, went there and evangelized these cannibals, and they repented and stopped eating people. Repent and stop eating people, I think they told them. But they live amongst these cannibals. They gave up the safety and the security of America to live in the jungle with cannibals for 2 years. Just not only leading them to the Lord, but discipling them. And I thought Elizabeth Elliot was fearless, but there was one thing she feared. I actually heard her say it on a radio show. She passed away, but years ago I heard her say, she was talking about her brother, Thomas Howard. Thomas Howard is the author of Evangelical is Not Enough. And he was a Protestant who converted to Catholicism. And she said, I wish I had the courage my brother had to convert to Catholicism. I'm telling you, I was a former Protestant. A lot of Protestants are afraid to convert, especially if that's your ministry. You know, if you're a pastor, like, what are you going to do? You can't become a priest. You got a wife and kids. You know, it's very scary for a lot of Catholics. That's why I'm grateful for who I am, because as a wise man once said, when you ain't got nothing, you ain't got nothing to lose. So when I knew the Catholic Church was the church that Jesus established, there was nothing holding me back, brother. And I love my Protestant brothers and sisters, and I preach to them uninvited. And this is my act of love towards them, uninvited, because I do love them and I want them to have the fullness of the faith. James says a prayer of a righteous man is very effective. And how do we get righteousness? From God's grace. It's God's grace. It's not our righteousness. It's Christ's righteousness. But how do we receive it in this busy world? We receive it through the sacraments. But if you're not part of the Catholic Church, how do you get the sacraments? So if you're a Catholic that left, or you're a Protestant that never was a Catholic, come home. Come home, receive the sacraments and get the grace. Go to confession and move the block of sin that blocks the grace from filling you. As a Catholic, you can have the whole gospel, the fullness of the faith. You have all the sacraments. You can have fellowship with all the saints, and especially the greatest saint, our Blessed Mother Mary. You can take it deeper with the rosary, deeper with the liturgy of the hours. How much Christ do you want? You can get the daily mass, How much Jesus do you want? I started with a quote from Peter Kreeft. I'm going to end with a quote from Peter Kreeft. He said, God's not coming back for a harem. He's coming back for a bride, one church, the one holy Catholic and Apostolic Church. So why wait? Join now. God bless, stay Catholic, and whether you're Protestant or Catholic, please do me a favor. If you're buying or selling real estate, go to a pro-life company. Go to realestateforlife.org. If you're buying or selling real estate or anything, you need a mover, you need a lawyer, whatever you need, please go to realestateforlife.org. God bless and stay Catholic.